Bitch, where's my money? If you want to help me out, you can subscribe to me on Patreon, which is Grimachu, on Subscribestar, which is Grim-Jim, or if you want to make a one-off donation to help support me and keep the channel going, you can do so at paypal.me/JDesborough. Thanks.
Hello my lovelies. Yes, I'm back and still alive. Doubtless that will annoy some people, but life is suffering, so you'll just have to put up with my continued existence for just a little while longer. I've had my operation, and now that I'm no longer in quite such an immediate risk of dying from stroke, aneurysm or heart attack, I hope things will be back on a more even keel from here on out. For those who don't already know, I had stage 2 hypertension with a blood pressure peaking at a little bit higher than 190/100. This is considered bad in the same way that a supernova is considered a little bit worse than a balloon pop. If you're not up on medical terminology, that basically meant I was a stretched out blood balloon, and I'd gush like a Kurosawa samurai at the slightest pinprick, or like a tweenage Gus at a BTS concert. Pick your metaphorical poison, I guess. How did I find out I was a ticking blood bomb? Well, I was at the optician almost a year ago now, since my eyesight is piss poor at the best of times, and we figured it would be a good time to get my peepers checked out while there was a lull in the COVID infection rate. The optician took one look in my eyes and told me to go to hospital. Rather like trying to put too much meat into a sausage, the high blood pressure had ruptured a bunch of blood vessels in my eyes, worsening my eyesight and threatening to make me permanently blind if it wasn't dealt with sooner rather than later. This is not what you want to hear from an optician, and it's almost as bad as hearing what they charge for spectacles on the high street these days. You expect better or worse, not go straight to the fucking hospital. I'm not kidding. Interesting side note, of course. Stress, fear and worry all raise your blood pressure. So, having been examined in hospital and made to feel even more stressed, I practically fainted from hypertension and was left plugged into a hospital bed for several days while they pumped assorted bath-inducing blood pressure medication into my arm and made not exactly reassuring comments like, "Oh my god," and "What? No!" about my blood pressure within earshot of me. A fun time was had by all at my expense, though I do think the sandbags and the Hurt Locker outfits were taking it a bit too far. There were scans and pokings, and it's the weirdest thing. You can feel an MRI, presumably pulling at the iron in your blood or the marker solution that they put in you. It's like the world's shittiest tractor beam. Anyway, all those tests came to an interesting conclusion, and the problem was my kidney. Kidneys are odd beasts. They can have one or several arteries supplying blood to them. One of mine has 2 arteries, the other has 1. Fortunately, it was the double-header kidney that had 1 partially blocked artery, but that was narrowed by about 70%. That's roughly the difference. Oh, to pull a comparison out of the air, roughly the difference between the dimensions of a human poop and the poop of, say, a Yorkshire Terrier. So about 1/2 of 1 kidney was only getting about 30% of the blood it needed to do its job. That doesn't sound too bad, and in terms of kidneys, it isn't really. You can get by on 1 kidney, much as a pirate can get around on 1 leg, but bodies are stupid, and they're clearly not intelligently designed. Unless, of course, you buy into the Cathar heresy that the material world was the creation of an evil god. Anyway, my kidney, it appears, was feeling starved of blood, and so took it upon itself to chemically inform the rest of my body that, "Oh my god, Grim must be bleeding to death because I'm not getting enough blood. Quick, retain all fluids and all salt." This, combined with the backing up of blood behind the blockage and its occasional sudden release as something gave, was making me endlessly thirsty and made me suffer with a combination of symptoms of both high and low blood pressure, which is less fun than a night out with Ezra Miller and even less predictable. I was put on drugs that made me sound bunged up all the time. and I was plagued with pain, fatigue, and numerous other horrible symptoms, which royally screwed up a whole bunch of work I had going on. I'm sure if I hadn't crowdfunded a project, I doubt any of this would have happened at all. Fate is a fickle, nasty, vindictive bitch. I'm making light. But this was life-threatening, and there were things I couldn't really do that you would normally do to help with blood pressure. Exercise, for example. I had to almost completely cut out my caffeine intake, lower my salt intake, and try not to endlessly drink fluids despite my body constantly being thirsty because it thought it was bleeding to death. I'm going to have to get back on that exercise pony, for while round is a shape, it's not the shape I want to be, despite all the downhill advantages of rolling. As soon as I can move again anyway, without pain stabbing through my crotch. Being seriously, life-threateningly ill, and I'm sorry for not being as open as I could have been about just how dangerous all this was for me, that the whole thing is no fun. And it's especially no fun during COVID. Everything was delayed. Checkups, scans, treatments, the operation itself. I was liaising with hospitals in 3 different NHS trusts, none of whom seemed to have a compatible appointment or alert system. And COVID and miscommunication kept pushing back my operation time and time again. Plus, I wasn't getting the postal letters about what was going on. My house is hard to find for some reason. You'd think medical letters would be treated with more importance than Domino's Pizza discount coupons, but alas no, and Domino's doesn't even deliver here. After a couple of false starts, I was finally booked in. The surgical hospital was quite a long way away from me, down in Portsmouth, which wasn't terribly convenient. Hospitals are still requiring full-on COVID tests before you go in, while the government has discontinued free testing, and the courier service that lets you get them done and tested in a timely manner has also been stopped. Since my operation was due directly following the platyjubes, this caused problems again, since I couldn't get my test done, posted in, tested, and the results come in before I had to turn up to have my organs poked. Yeah, nice to have a holiday, but just talk about timing. Instead, we had to go and turn up to the hospital super duper early, go to the wrong department, which was open, to explain the need for a test to clear me for the department that was closed, then make our way back across the labyrinthine hospital, fight a minotaur, and unravel a long ball of string to get to the right ward at the right time when it did open, so I could wait to have someone poke my innards. The doctor was a bit of an arrogant prick, but he got the job done. Having had a thin piece of wire pushed inside me, I'm really not sure how you ladies cope with 8 inches of meaty penis. I was also disappointed that even though I let him inside me, and even though I let him poke me in the wrong hole, he wouldn't marry me. So don't give it up so easily, girls, even if he is a doctor. He really did poke me in the wrong hole. He took a wrong turn on the way to my artery, and I've never felt anything so painful in my life. It still hurts a little, but in the moment that was horribly intense, like being kicked in the balls with a flaming shoe, but in your side and back at the same time. So then he finally poked the wire through the correct artery and then opened up a little device, a stent, to hold my artery open and to restore blood flow. And it was a resounding success. Within the hour, my blood pressure dropped from 160 over 100 to 120 over 80. Much better. And is generally even better now. Remarkable, really. Modern science. Amazing stuff. Now this, of course, cost me nothing. So suck it, Americans, with your high rate of gunshot wounds and ironically coupled with medical bankruptcy. What a winning combination. I did look it up, though, and a renal angioplasty and stent, with all the hospital care, scans, etc., could rush you as much as $300,000 in the US of A. Which just goes to show the ruinous effect of inflation, because Steve Austin got 2 bionic legs, a bionic arm, and a bionic eye for $6 million. I got a tiny piece of metal netting in 1 kidney for $300,000. At least I can legitimately call myself a cyborg now, even though it's kind of stretching it a little. Now, to do the operation, they go in through your groin, which is a weird thing to have happen after COVID isolation, let me tell you. After spending months and months barely interacting with anyone at all, To suddenly have a whole crew of nurses and doctors intimately touching you and observing your knackers, it's a real trip. Still, it was a success, even though it left me with an oozing groin wound, which is what I think they call women on 4chan these days. Anyway, I was able to head home the same day. A few days on, and I am mostly able to hobble around, to occasionally bend over to pick things up, and to pee without it burning too much. I think a usable erection would be asking too much at this point, but we all have our crosses to bear. I just prefer St Andrew's crosses, and for me, not to be the one on them. Anyway, I hope to be back on form and off the last of these blood pressure medications before too long. Hopefully I can start to clear up some of my backlog, get that crowdfunded project complete, and everything else. I just want to make sure I'm really okay before committing to anything too much. Love you all, hope to be around a long while longer, if only to piss certain people off. Zang.
Flick pig. There's no big story to this, even the title's just a way to get away with writing fuck pig. It's not some earth-shaking attempt to thrust upon you the evils of meat eating. I eat meat because it's fucking delicious. David Cameron got me thinking about pigs. Then I got into some arguments with vegans. Then I made a horror dungeon game in which you play pigs trying to escape a horrible, fantastical slaughterhouse. That's about it. If that upsets you, do one. A print-and-play OSR dungeon crawl with pigs. Available at post-mort.com and Drive-Thru RPG.
Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba